In the Alencar mansion, where silence hung heavy as gold and secrets breathed in the shadows, a black woman with calloused hands and a steadfast soul scrubbed the marble floor, silently carrying a secret that would forever shake the foundations of that family. Rosa Conceição was more than a housekeeper. She was the keeper of a truth buried beneath years of lies, money, and abandonment. And when danger knocked on that door, she didn't hesitate. She shielded the boy with her own body. She faced armed kidnappers with nothing but a broom and courage. But what happened next ran even deeper, because Rosa knew something no one else did, and when that secret came to light, nothing would ever be the same. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. Rosa Conceição woke up every day at 5 in the morning, when the sky still held the color of dawn and the whole world seemed to slumber in peace. She got ready in the quiet of her rented room on the outskirts, put on her faded blue uniform, and walked to the bus stop, carrying an old bag, a cold lunchbox, and the weight of a lifetime of loss. Arriving at the Alencar mansion, she entered through the back door, as do those who are unseen but sustain the sparkle of things. Rosa spent her day among brooms, buckets, and mops. She cleaned mirrors that never reflected her face. She arranged flowers that were never picked for her. She polished the marble her bare feet would never tread upon with dignity. She was invisible. To Otávio Alencar, the owner of that fortress of glass and luxury, Rosa was just the cleaning lady. He barely looked at her. When he needed something, he snapped his fingers or left a note in the kitchen. He didn't know her full name. He didn't know where she came from. He didn't know that behind that faded apron was a woman who had once been a mother, who had buried dreams, and who, every day, returned to this world of appearances to fulfill a mission no one understood. Vitória, Otávio's wife, was different, but not by much. She was polite, smiled occasionally, thanked her in a low voice, but her gaze never met Rosa's for more than 2 seconds. It was as if looking too much was dangerous. As if seeing too much was acknowledging something she preferred to ignore. But there was someone in that house who truly saw Rosa. Pedro was 8 years old. He was a quiet boy with large, curious eyes who spent his days alone among expensive toys and empty rooms. At first, he hid from her. He watched from a distance as Rosa swept the hallway or tidied the living room. But slowly, he began to approach. He started asking questions. He asked why she hummed while she cleaned. He asked if she had children. He asked if the sky was the same size everywhere. Rosa answered with patience and affection. She told stories about the stars, about the smell of rain on packed earth, about birds that flew far in search of home. Pedro listened to it all as if they were secrets of the universe, and in a way, they were. He began to follow her around the house. He helped fold towels. He asked if he could hold the cloth. Rosa would laugh softly and let him. She knew how to recognize loneliness in a child's eyes. She had seen it before, in the eyes of the daughter she had lost years ago, when poverty and the world's indifference had stolen her right to be a mother. She never spoke of it, but every time she looked at Pedro, an old ache stirred in her chest. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. And so, between brooms and stories, Rosa began to become a part of that boy's life. Unbeknownst to them, soon she would be the one to save him from death. On a muggy Friday afternoon, Vitória had traveled for an event in another city. Otávio was locked in his office as usual, taking important calls and signing papers that moved millions. Pedro played alone in the garden, building imaginary castles with twigs and stones. Rosa was cleaning the porch when she heard the sound of an engine. She looked up and saw a black car parked in front of the gate. The windows were dark. The engine was still running. 2 men got out. They wore ordinary clothes, but there was something wrong in the way they moved. Too fast, too tense. They rang the intercom. The guard, an elderly man who often napped in his post, didn't answer. Rosa dropped her cloth and walked to the window. She watched from a distance. One of the men looked around impatiently. The other spoke into the intercom, lying about a delivery, but no delivery was expected. Rosa knew this, and then she saw it. As the man turned, his shirt lifted slightly, and there, tucked into his waistband, was the unmistakable outline of a gun. Rosa's heart leaped. She looked at the garden. Pedro was still playing, oblivious to everything, and it was at that moment that everything changed. Rosa Conchesson wasn't born to be invisible, but life has a cruel way of erasing those without a voice, of pushing into the shadows those the world decides not to see. She was born in the countryside, in a house with dirt floors and adobe walls, the daughter of a laundress and a man who left before she turned 5. She grew up watching her mother bend over other people's laundry tubs, her hands red from scrubbing, her eyes tired from dreaming so little. From an early age, Rosa learned that work was the only currency people like her had to offer the world. So she worked. She cleaned houses, cared for children, washed clothes, served tables. She did whatever it took to survive. And one day, she met love. It was brief, intense, true. A man with an easy smile and pretty promises who disappeared when her belly began to swell. Rosa raised her daughter alone. She named her Luana, meaning full moon, because she was born on a moonlit night. Luana was all Rosa had. She was the laughter that filled the house, the reason to wake up early, the motivation to endure the ache in her back and the weariness in her bones. Rosa worked 2-3 shifts to ensure the girl had food, clothes, school. It was never easy, but it was love, and love sustains, until life decided to take it all away again. Luana fell ill at 6, a fever that wouldn't break, a cough that scratched the night. Rosa rushed her to the health clinic, but there was no doctor. She rushed to the hospital, but there was no bed. She begged, she cried, she screamed, but no one heard. By the time they finally attended to her, it was too late. Luana died in her mother's arms, her large eyes still searching the sky, still believing someone would come to save her. Rosa was never the same again. She buried her daughter in a forgotten cemetery, with a wooden cross and no words but, "Luana, my light." After that, something inside her went out. It wasn't strength. Rosa was always strong. It wasn't dignity that she carried like an inheritance. It was the hope that the world could be fair. She kept working because it was what she knew how to do, because stopping would mean dying along with it. And something inside her, perhaps her mother's voice, perhaps the memory of Luana, still whispered that living was a form of resistance. That's how Rosa ended up at the Alencar mansion. She answered an ad. She got through the interview with Victoria, who barely looked at her. She was hired. She started the next day. At first, it was just another job, another rich house to clean, another place where she'd be ignored. But something changed when she saw Pedro for the first time. The boy was sitting alone on the stairs, clutching a toy car, with that distant look of someone who has everything and, at the same time, nothing. Rosa walked past him carrying a bucket. He looked up. She smiled. And in that instant, Rosa saw Luana. Not physically, but in the loneliness, in the fragility, in the way the boy seemed lost within the house. She recognized it, and she decided to stay close, not out of pity, but because, somehow, taking care of Pedro was a way to honor the memory of the daughter she had lost. With time, the boy began to trust her. He asked about the stars, about the birds, about the smell of rain. Rosa answered everything with patience. She told stories her mother had told her. She taught Pedro to see beauty in simple things, a cricket singing at night, the color of the sunset, the sound of the wind in the leaves. He called her Aunt Rosa, and that was more than she had hoped for, more than she thought she deserved. Rosa cleaned that house with her hands. But secretly, she was also cleaning her own soul. She was trying to find meaning in her pain. She was trying to believe there was still goodness in the world, and maybe there was. But fate had other plans. At the Alencar mansion, everything seemed perfect to outsiders. The white walls, the immaculate gardens, the crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, like tiny imprisoned suns. But behind the silk curtains and practiced smiles, there was a heavy silence. The kind of silence that hides hurts, secrets, and truths no one dares to speak. Otavio Alencar was a man of few words and many absences. He spent his days locked in his office, taking calls that decided the fate of entire companies, signing contracts that moved millions, building an empire that distanced him further and further from everything that truly mattered. He loved his son, or at least believed he did, but didn't know how to show it, didn't know how to be present. For Otavio, loving meant providing, and he provided everything except his presence. Victoria, in turn, lived trapped in a gilded cage. She was beautiful, elegant, admired at social events, but inside she was a lonely woman. She had married Otavio for love, or at least for what she thought was love at the time. Over time, she realized that sharing her life with him was like living next to a ghost. He was there, but he wasn't. He slept beside her, but he dreamed of spreadsheets and meetings. Victoria compensated for her loneliness with trips, shopping, parties, but nothing filled the void. And Pedro, the son who was supposed to be the bridge between them, ended up becoming just another reminder that something was wrong in that house. Rosa observed it all in silence. She saw the closed doors. She heard the muffled arguments. She felt the coldness that hung over that home like an invisible fog, and in the midst of it all, she saw Pedro, a sweet, lonely boy who spent his days searching for attention and affection in toys that didn't answer back. That's why Rosa gradually became the only person Pedro truly trusted. She listened to him, she laughed with him, she was there. But not everything in the house was just indifference. There was also envy. There were also sidelong glances. Joanna, the cook who had worked at the mansion for years, watched Rosa with suspicion. She didn't like her closeness with the boy. She didn't like the way Victoria sometimes thanked Rosa with a softer tone. Joanna felt she was losing ground, and it gnawed at her. "She wants to show off," Joanna muttered to the driver as she watched Rosa play with Pedro in the garden. "A cleaner isn't a nanny. She's not family, but she's sticking her nose where it doesn't belong." The driver just shrugged. He didn't want trouble, but Joanna harbored resentment. And resentment, when fed, grows like a weed. Besides, there was something else, something Rosa had never told anyone, something only she knew. There was a reason she was there. And it wasn't just the job. When Rosa saw Pedro's full name for the first time, written on an envelope on the living room table, her heart stopped. Pedro Alencar Silva. That last name, Silva. It was Rosa's sister's surname, the sister who had disappeared years ago after getting involved with a rich and powerful man, the sister who had become pregnant and was silenced with money and threats. Rosa never knew the man's name, but she knew his son's name. And when she found Pedro's birth certificate in a drawer while cleaning the office, she saw the biological mother's name, Clarice Silva, her sister. The ground opened up beneath Rosa's feet that day. Pedro was her nephew, the son of the sister she had never seen again, the sister who had died alone, far from family, buried in a place Rosa never discovered. And Otavio Alencar was the father. But he didn't know, or he pretended not to know. Or he'd hidden the truth so well that he'd even convinced himself it never happened. Rosa decided to stay, not for revenge, not for money, but because Pedro was all that was left of Clarice. He was her sister's blood. He was Rosa's last chance to do what she couldn't do for Luana, protect a child. And so, Rosa Conceição, the invisible cleaner, began to live a double life. By day, she cleaned floors. By night, she carried a secret that could destroy that family. But fate was about to force that secret into the open, because danger was already on its way. It was on a sweltering afternoon, when the sky hung grey and the air felt sticky on the skin, that Rosa's world came crashing down. Victoria had travelled for an event in another city. Ottavio was in his office, as always, immersed in papers and calls. Pedro was playing alone in the garden, building imaginary castles with twigs and stones. Rosa was cleaning the porch, humming softly a song her mother had taught her. And then she saw it, a black car parked in front of the gate. The windows were dark, the engine was running. 2 men got out. There was something wrong with the way they moved, too fast, too tense. One of them pressed the intercom. He lied about a delivery, but Rosa knew there was no package. And then she saw the gun, tucked into the waistband of one of the men, barely hidden under his shirt. Rosa's heart leaped. Instinct screamed. She dropped the rag, dropped the bucket, and ran. "Pedro!" she yelled, crossing the living room. The boy looked up, startled. "Get over here, now!" She grabbed him by the arm and pulled him inside. She locked the door. She ran to the office and banged hard on Ottavio's door. "Mr. Ottavio, there are armed men at the gate." Ottavio looked up, annoyed. He didn't believe it immediately. He thought she was exaggerating. But before he could respond, a crash was heard. The living room window exploded into 1,000 pieces. The men were inside the house. "Where's the boy?" one of them shouted, pointing his gun down the hall. Ottavio froze, but Rosa didn't. She pushed Pedro into a closet in the pantry. She told him to be quiet, said not to make a sound. And then she returned to the hallway, broom in hand, her heart pounding like a drum, but her gaze steady. "You're not touching him," she said, her voice trembling but firm. The men laughed. "Get out of the way, old lady. This doesn't concern you." "I said you're not touching him." One of the men lunged. Rosa raised the broom like a spear and hit his arm with such force that the gun fell to the floor. The other man reacted, but Rosa screamed. She screamed with all her might, set off the house alarm, and made enough noise to wake the neighbors. Ottavio, finally reacting, locked himself in the office and called the police. The kidnappers tried to flee, but the alarm and the screams attracted attention. Within minutes, patrol cars surrounded the mansion. The men were arrested before they could get out of the yard. Pedro was safe, and Rosa collapsed on the floor, trembling, her hands bruised, and her heart in pieces. When the police entered, they found the boy hidden in the closet, clutching a toy car, crying softly. And they found Rosa sitting in the hallway, holding the broom as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Ottavio rushed to his son and hugged him desperately. Vittoria was called in a hurry and returned on the first flight. The house became a chaos of police officers, questions and statements, and no one thanked Rosa. No one looked at her. She was just another witness, just the housekeeper who was there. But the worst was yet to come. Days later, during the interrogation, one of the kidnappers confessed. He said he had been an employee of Ottavio's company. He had been fired months ago after a corruption scandal. He said he knew a secret about his boss, a secret involving a woman, a black woman, and an illegitimate son Ottavio had never acknowledged. He said that housekeeper wasn't there by chance. He said she knew everything, and that's how Rosa, who had saved the boy from death, became a suspect. In the days following the kidnapping, the Alencar mansion became a minefield of silences and suspicious glances. The police were still investigating. Journalists loitered by the gate, and inside the house, the air was heavy as lead. Rosa was called in to testify more than once. She answered all questions calmly, with the same dignity as always. But she felt the weight of suspicion on her shoulders. She heard the whispers. She saw the looks. Joanna, the cook, no longer hid her hostility. "I always knew there was something wrong with that woman," she'd murmur to the driver, "appeared out of nowhere, became friendly with the boy. And now look, the criminals talked about her. It's no coincidence." The driver, uncomfortable, would look away. Vittoria, meanwhile, was conflicted. She had thanked Rosa for what she had done, But now, with the kidnapper's words echoing in her mind, she began to doubt. Who was that woman, anyway? Why was she so close to Pedro? Could it really have been just a coincidence? Otavio avoided Rosa. He wouldn't look at her, he wouldn't speak to her. But deep down, something gnawed at him. Because he knew. He knew what he had done years ago. He knew about the woman he had gotten pregnant. He knew about the son he had left behind, and he knew that if it all came out, everything would crumble. Rosa felt it all. She felt the weight of the silence. She felt the injustice. She had saved the boy. She had risked her own life, and now she was being treated as a suspect. But she said nothing, because the secret she carried was bigger than her, and revealing the truth would mean exposing Pedro to a pain he didn't deserve to carry. On a cold night, Rosa sat alone in the small room in the back where she slept. She looked at her calloused hands, at the marks of years of work, of sacrifice, of invisibility, and she cried. She cried for the daughter she had lost, for the sister she had never seen again, for the boy she loved in secret, and for herself, for the woman who had given so much and received so little in return. But amidst the pain, an ancient strength awoke within her, the same strength that had helped her survive the loss of Luana, the same strength that had brought her to this house, the strength of someone who has lost everything and therefore has nothing left to lose. Rosa wiped away her tears. She took a deep breath and decided that if the truth needed to come out, it would, but at the right time and in the right way. The next day, she woke up early, as always. She put on her uniform. She picked up her broom and went back to work. Pedro, who had been scared and quiet since the kidnapping, saw Rosa in the hallway. He ran to her and hugged her tightly. "Aunt Rosa, thank you for saving me," he whispered, his voice choked. Rosa stroked the boy's head and smiled. "You don't need to thank me, my son. I'll always protect you." At that moment, Otavio walked down the hall and heard. He stopped. He turned, and for the first time, he truly looked at Rosa. He saw the strength. He saw the pain. He saw the truth that was there, before him, all along, and something inside him began to crack. Because he knew. He knew that woman wasn't just a housekeeper. He knew there was a bond. He knew the past was coming back to claim what he had tried to bury. But he still didn't have the courage to face it, and Rosa patiently waited, because the truth always finds a way to shine, even in the midst of darkness. The revelation began quietly, like all great truths, not with shouts or scandals, but with a small detail, a forgotten photo, a scribbled name, a memory that insisted on returning. It was Pedro who brought the first clue. One afternoon, as Rosa was tidying his room, the boy pulled a box from under the bed. It was old, dusty, full of things Vittoria had kept without quite knowing why. Pedro opened the box and started rummaging. Rosa, curious, approached. "What is this, my angel?" "I don't know. I found it here a long time ago. It has a lot of my mum's stuff." Rosa felt her heart ache. Vittoria wasn't Pedro's biological mother, but the boy didn't know that, or at least no one had ever told him. Pedro pulled out a photo. It was old, faded. It showed a young black woman with a wide smile and bright eyes. She was sitting on a park bench, her hand on her belly, pregnant. Rosa took the photo and trembled. It was Clarice, her sister. "Who is this, Aunt Rosa?" Pedro asked innocently. Rosa couldn't answer right away. She just held the photo with both hands, like someone holding something sacred, something she'd long believed lost forever. She's someone very important," she said. Her voice choked with emotion. That night, Rosa couldn't sleep. She stared at the photo, remembering her sister, remembering the days when they were just kids, running barefoot through the dusty yard, laughing without knowing how much pain life held. Clarice had left at 19, said she'd gotten a job in the big city, said she'd be back soon, but she never returned. Rosa tried to find her, but it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Then, one day, the news arrived. Clarice had died, alone, without family, without anyone. But Rosa never knew the details. She never knew about the son, not until she came to this house. Now, holding that photo, Rosa understood everything. Clarice had been Ottavio's mistress. She'd gotten pregnant. She'd been pushed aside, silenced, and she'd died without anyone caring. And Pedro was her son. Rosa knew she had to tell him. But how? How do you tell an 8-year-old boy that the life he knew was a lie? She decided to wait, but not for long. The truth began to leak out in other ways. At a meeting with the family's lawyers, one of the kidnappers, in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealed more details. He said he'd been fired from Ottavio's company after discovering compromising documents. Documents that showed monthly payments made to a woman years ago, Clarice Silva, payments that stopped when she died. Ottavio's lawyer tried to bury the case, but the information leaked, and Vittoria found out. It was a stormy night. Vittoria confronted Ottavio in his study. She screamed, she cried, she demanded answers. Ottavio, cornered, confessed. Yes, there was a woman. Yes, she got pregnant. Yes, he paid her to disappear. And yes, that woman had died. But he'd never claimed the son, never wanted to know. He'd paid another family to adopt the boy as their own. But Vittoria, who couldn't get pregnant, had insisted on adopting a child. And Ottavio, with a cynical twist and a need for control, had offered Pedro, his own son. As if he were a stranger, Vittoria collapsed. Everything she believed in was a lie. The marriage, the family, the son she loved. And it was in that chaos that Rosa was called. Ottavio, desperate, needed answers. He needed to know how Rosa had found out everything. He needed to know why she was there. And Rosa finally told him. With a firm voice and eyes full of tears, she told him about Clarice, about the sister she'd lost, about the day she saw Pedro's name and recognized the surname, about her decision to stay, not for revenge, but for love. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," Rosa said. "I came because Pedro is all that's left of my sister, and I couldn't leave him alone, not again." The silence that followed was deafening. Pedro, who had been listening hidden behind the door, entered the room. He looked at Rosa. He looked at Ottavio. And he asked, his voice trembling, "So, you're my real aunt?" Rosa nodded, crying, and Pedro ran into her arms. The truth, once freed, can no longer be imprisoned. It spreads like light through cracks, like water seeking its level, like justice that will not be silenced. In the days that followed, the Alencar mansion ceased to be a palace of appearances. It became a field of emotional ruins, where each member of the family had to face the mirror and confront who they truly were. Vittoria cried for days. She felt betrayed, deceived, used. But deep down she also felt relief, because the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. And Pedro, the boy she loved as her son, continued to be her son, not by blood, but by love. Ottavio, for his part, faced the worst: guilt, remorse, the shame of having abandoned a pregnant woman, of having bought silence, of having brought his own son home and pretended he was a stranger. He tried to justify himself, said he was young, that he was scared, that he didn't know what to do, but the words sounded hollow, because there was no justification, only cowardice. And Pedro, the center of it all, had to deal with the revelation that his entire life had been built on a lie. But somehow he didn't feel anger. He felt only clarity, because now he understood why he had always felt different, why he had always felt something was missing, and why Rosa, from the first day, had looked at him with so much affection. "You always knew, didn't you, Aunt Rosa?" he asked one afternoon, as they sat in the garden. "I always knew," Rosa replied, holding his hand. "And why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want you to carry this pain alone. I wanted you to just be a child. At least for a while." Pedro nodded and hugged Rosa tightly. "Thank you for staying." Rosa smiled, her eyes welling up. "I will never abandon you." Justice began to unfold in unexpected ways. Ottavio, pressured by guilt and the truth, made a decision. He sought out Clarice's family, the few who were still living, and asked for forgiveness. He offered financial compensation, but more than that, he offered recognition. He publicly acknowledged that Pedro was his biological son, and he ensured that Clarice's name would be honored. Vittoria, in turn, invited Rosa to leave the back room. She offered her a place in the house, not as a housekeeper, but as family, because Pedro needed her, and, in a way, Vittoria did too. But Rosa refused. "I appreciate it, from the bottom of my heart. But I don't belong in this world, I never did, and that's okay." "Then where will you stay?" Vittoria asked, concerned. "I'll go back to my house, my place, but I'll keep coming here, because Pedro is my blood." "And you don't abandon blood." And so Rosa Conceção, the invisible cleaner, ceased to be invisible. She stopped being just the cleaning lady, and she became who she had always been, a woman of courage, of dignity, of love. Pedro began visiting her every weekend. He brought drawings, told stories, shared dreams, and Rosa finally felt it was worth it to have stayed, worth it to have faced it all, worth it to have loved. Because in the end, justice didn't come from the courts. It didn't come from money. It came from the truth. It came from recognition. It came from love that survives all lies. And that's how that simple woman, who only wanted respect, showed that true brilliance isn't in gold, but in the soul. Months passed since the day the truth exploded like thunder over the Alencar mansion. Time, patient and relentless, did its work. The wounds didn't heal completely, some never do, but they started to hurt less. And little by little, life found a new rhythm. Rosa returned to her modest home on the outskirts. She kept working, but now he had something he'd never had before, the certainty that he'd made a difference, that his life had mattered, that the love he'd given had been received and returned. Pedro was growing up strong and happy. He still lived with Ottavio and Vittoria, but now he knew where he came from. He knew who his birth mother was. He knew Clarice had loved him. And he knew Rosa, the aunt who had saved him, would never abandon him. Every Saturday, Pedro visited Rosa. He brought her flowers, drawings, stories from school, and Rosa, with the same smile as always, welcomed him with open arms. She'd bake cornmeal cake. She'd tell stories about Clarice, and she'd teach the boy to see the world through his heart. "Aunt Rosa, can I ask you something?" Pedro said on one of those sunny afternoons. "Anything, my angel. Don't you hate my dad? For what he did to your sister?" Rosa took a deep breath. She looked at the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink. "I was angry, very. But anger is a weight we carry alone, and I've carried enough weight in my life, so I chose to forgive, not for him, but for me, and for you." Pedro nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're the strongest person I know." Rosa smiled and stroked his head. "We don't choose strength, my dear. We just find it when there's no other way." And it was true. Rosa hadn't chosen to be strong. Life had forced her to be. But now, looking at Pedro, looking at the sky, looking at everything she had survived, she felt peace. Ottavio had changed too. Not overnight. Real changes are never quick, but he started to be more present. He started to see Pedro not as a secret he needed to hide, but as a son who deserved to be loved. And, over time, he began to value Rosa. Not just with words, but with actions. He made sure she was secure, that she never went without again. Vittoria, in turn, found an unlikely friend in Rosa. The two women, so different, so distant in their realities, discovered they had something in common. They both loved Pedro, and they both knew what it was to carry pain in silence. One afternoon, Vittoria visited Rosa at her home. She brought flowers. She sat in the simple living room, drank coffee made in a drip filter, and talked. She talked about life, about choices, about regrets. "I still feel guilty," Vittoria confessed, "for not asking more, for not being suspicious." "You couldn't have known," Rosa said gently. "Sometimes we live our whole lives next to the truth without seeing it, because we only see what we're ready to see." Vittoria nodded, her eyes welling up. "Thank you, Rosa, for everything, for saving my son, for showing me what real courage is." Rosa smiled. "You don't need to thank me. I did what any mother would do." And in that moment, Vittoria understood. Rosa wasn't just the cleaner who scrubbed floors. She was the woman who had scrubbed, with courage and love, the dirt no one wanted to see. She was the woman who had taught them all what truly matters. One Sunday morning, Rosa woke up early and went to the small garden she tended in the back of her house. She planted a jasmine cutting, Clarice's favorite flower. She watered it carefully and whispered, "This is for you, sister, and for Luana, and for all of us who remained." The wind blew softly, as if carrying a response, and Rosa smiled, because now she knew that pain was part of the story, but it wasn't the end of it. The end was light. The end was love. The end was the dignity of having lived truthfully. That night, Pedro called her. He said he missed her. He said he loved her. And Rosa, her heart full, replied, "I love you too, my son. I always will." And that's how that simple woman, who only wanted respect, showed that true brilliance isn't found in gold, but in the soul. And you, what did you think of this story? What lesson did it leave for you? Tell us in the comments, and take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our stories that move you every day.